In March 1987, 5 Soviet nuclear submarines vanished. They triggered the NATO detection line near the United Kingdom and then disappeared completely. Washington panicked. London panicked. 3 American aircraft carriers, 6 attack submarines, a British carrier, and dozens of patrol aircraft were scrambled across the Atlantic to find them. They found nothing. For 8 days, the most advanced anti-submarine force in human history searched the ocean and came up empty. What the Soviets did not know was that the United States had been watching every single move from the beginning and was waiting for the perfect moment to show it. To understand what happened in 1987, you need to understand what the Cold War looked like underwater. For decades, the Soviet Navy had one fundamental problem. Their submarines were loud, dangerously loud. American sonar operators could hear them from hundreds of miles away. The United States had built an underwater listening network called SOSUS, Sound Surveillance System, a web of hydrophones stretched across the Atlantic Ocean floor. Every Soviet submarine that entered the Atlantic was tracked almost immediately. The Soviets knew this. And by the early 1980s, they had built something that genuinely concerned the Pentagon. The Victor III class submarine, quieter than anything the Soviet Navy had ever produced, faster than most of what NATO had to counter it. And in March 1987, Soviet Admiral Vladimir Chernovin sent 5 of them directly toward the American coast. The operation was called Atrina, and it was designed to do one thing: prove that the Soviet Navy could reach the United States without being detected. They believed they had succeeded. They were wrong. The 5 submarines left the Kola Peninsula under sealed orders. The captains were not told their destination until they reached a specific latitude in the Barents Sea. From there, instead of taking the standard route through the GIUK Gap between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, which SOSUS covered completely, they went around, under the ice shelf along the western coast of Greenland, a route that was longer, more dangerous, and significantly harder to monitor. When they emerged into the Atlantic and triggered the SOSUS line near Britain, NATO went to maximum alert. 5 Victor III submarines simultaneously. This had never happened before. The response was immediate and overwhelming. HMS Illustrious, a British aircraft carrier, RAF Nimrod maritime patrol aircraft, 3 United States Navy carrier battle groups, 6 American attack submarines, all of them searching the same ocean. For 8 days, nothing. The Soviets had vanished. In Moscow, this was considered a triumph, proof that the Soviet Navy had finally closed the technological gap, that they could penetrate American defenses and reach the East Coast undetected. They began preparing the announcement, and that was their mistake. Here is what the Soviets did not know. The United States had not lost them. American sonar technicians aboard submarines already positioned in the Atlantic had been tracking all 5 Victor IIIs from almost the moment they left Greenland. The 8 days of apparent confusion, the scramble carriers, the patrol aircraft, the public searches were not panic. They were theater, designed to make the Soviets believe their route had worked, to gather intelligence on exactly how the Victor IIIs moved, how they communicated, how they responded to being hunted, without ever revealing that they had already been found. When the U.S. Navy finally made a public statement on April 7, 1987, confirming that Soviet submarines were operating near Bermuda and that forces had been dispatched to monitor them, Reagan was asked directly by reporters whether he was concerned. He said, and these are his exact words, "You're asking a civilian." The Soviets had reached the American coast. The Americans had watched them the entire way, and now everyone knew it. Operation Atrina ended in May 1987. The 5 submarines returned to the Soviet Union. In Moscow, the operation was declared a success, proof of Soviet naval capability, proof that the Atlantic could be penetrated, proof that the Americans could be outmaneuvered. What actually happened was the opposite. The United States had learned exactly how the Victor IIIs moved when they believed they were undetected. Their routes, their depths, their communication patterns, their response to anti-submarine pressure, every piece of intelligence the Soviets thought they were gathering, the Americans were gathering too. And in exchange for 8 days of theater, the U.S. Navy had a complete operational profile of the most advanced Soviet attack submarine in existence. The last major Soviet submarine operation in the Atlantic followed 2 years later. After that, nothing. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. The Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. And the 5 submarines of Operation Atrina, the pride of the Soviet Navy, the proof that America could be humiliated, rusted quietly in port, without ever firing a single shot. The United States Navy did not win the Cold War with battles. It won with patience, with technology, and with the ability to let an enemy believe they had won, right up until the moment it no longer mattered. That is how you humiliate a superpower without firing a single shot. If you want the next operation, subscribe. There are more files to open.